I am 82 years old. I lost 25 kilograms, and at my last checkup, my doctor sat in silence for a full minute before picking up his pen and crossing out every single one of my prescriptions. They say that after 70, the body is just a machine out of warranty, that the stiffness, the weight, and the morning pills are the inevitable tax for having lived so long. I accepted that contract for 10 years, but I discovered something that is not in the manuals. My muscles do not have a birth certificate. They do not know I am a great-grandmother. They only know the resistance I offer them and what I choose to put on my plate. At 82, I am not just lasting, I am living. I did not find a miracle. I just refuse to be invisible. If you also feel like the world is starting to write your final chapter too soon, stay here, subscribe, and say you are still present in the comments. Do it so we know we are not the only ones who chose not to disappear. Stay with me. We have a long way to walk. The floorboards always tell the truth first. Long before my mind catches up in the morning, my feet know exactly what kind of day it is going to be. It is a rhythmic groan, is it not? That sound the wood makes. It matched the dull, stubborn ache in my hips. Every single morning for years it was the same struggle. Just peeling my body off the mattress felt like I was trying to lift a house. I would sit there on the edge of the bed for a good 5 minutes, just waiting for the stiffness to settle into something I could manage. I was 70 then. That is a number that carries its own weight. But it was not just the years. I was carrying 25 extra kilograms, a lead vest I had not been able to unbuckle for over a decade. I would look at my reflection in the hallway mirror as I shuffled past, and I did not see Lisa anymore. Not the Lisa I remembered. I saw a woman who had simply accepted the tax for getting older. I told myself the warranty on my joints had simply expired, that this was just what happened when the clock kept ticking. Sunday mornings were the hardest. That was when the ritual happened. Most people were at church or out for a walk in the park, but I was at the kitchen table. Just me and those little amber bottles. Click, clack, that sharp rhythmic sound of the plastic lids. I would sit there for nearly an hour, sorting my life into a 5-compartment organizer. 11 different little white doses, every single morning, just to keep the lights on. I did not feel like a woman anymore. I felt like a collection of symptoms being managed by a chemical schedule. My fingertips always had that faint metallic scent from handling them. It was my survival, or that is what I called it back then. But looking back, it was just a way to maintain a safe baseline while the rest of me was slowly going dark. My world started getting smaller. You do not notice it at first because it happens in the margins. It is a slow, quiet, disappearing act. My friend Martha called me on a Saturday. It was one of those rare, crisp afternoons where the light hits the trees just right, and she wanted to go to the botanical gardens. I said no. I made some excuse about the laundry or the house being a mess. But the truth? I knew there were not enough benches. I knew that every 50 yards I would have to stop and catch my breath while my knees screamed at me. I did not want to be the one holding everyone back. I did not want to be the woman everyone had to wait for. So I stayed inside. The air in the living room gets stagnant when you do not open the windows. I would sit by the glass and watch the neighbors. I would watch them walk their dogs or carry heavy bags of groceries, and I felt like I was watching a movie of a life I used to have. That particular Saturday, I remember looking at my little counter at the end of the night. 842 steps. That was it. Mostly just the distance between the sofa and the refrigerator. I thought to myself, if I just stay perfectly still, maybe it will not hurt as much. But the problem with staying still is that you start to fade away while you are still breathing. I had surrendered. I really had. I figured this was the slow fade everyone talked about. The long, quiet walk toward the end where you just let go of the things you cannot do anymore. I thought I was being realistic. I thought I was being brave by accepting it. But then something happened. It was not a big moment. It was a tiny, quiet thing. I was reaching for one of those amber bottles on the kitchen counter, and my sleeve caught the edge of a dusty old frame on the side table. It tipped over. I picked it up to straighten it, and for a second, I found myself looking into the eyes of a girl I had not thought about in 40 years. I stood there in the silence of that kitchen, holding that photo, and a tiny cold shiver went down my spine. I looked at my hands, stiff, heavy, and smelling of plastic bottles, and then back at that girl. And I wondered, is she still in there? Or is it too late to even ask? I kept that old photo of myself as a girl on the counter for 3 days. I would look at it while the kettle whistled, trying to find a bridge between that bright-eyed child and the woman who now struggled just to reach for a mug. But the real crack in the porcelain, the moment the denial finally shattered, that did not happen until June 15th. It was my grandson's graduation. A beautiful, sweltering afternoon. I remember the heat felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders as I sat in that rose-deep sea of folding chairs. I spent the whole ceremony just praying for it to be over. Not because I was not proud. Lord, I was bursting. But because my back was screaming and the back of my legs was sticking to the plastic, and I felt like a massive, heavy ghost haunting my own family's joy. A week later, the printed photos arrived. I was sitting right where I am now, sliding them out of the envelope. I found the one of the whole family. There they all were, vibrant, leaning in, laughing. And there, in the back row, was a gray shape. It took me a full minute to realize that shape was me. I did not look like a grandmother. I looked like a person waiting for the end of the ceremony, and maybe the end of everything else too. I was slumped, my chin tucked into my neck, my eyes looking at nothing. I looked withdrawn, like I had already checked out of the room. You can tell yourself stories in the mirror. You can adjust the lighting. You can wear the loose sweaters. You can blame the slow fade. But a camera does not have a heart. It just shows you what is there. And what was there was a woman who was disappearing while she was still breathing. But the final straw? It was not the photo. It was the cat. A little stray had started coming around my porch. One afternoon, I decided to be brave. I grabbed a saucer of milk and went out to the living room rug. I thought, I will just sit here and see if he will come to me. I lowered myself down, hand by hand, clutching the coffee table, then the sofa arm, until I was finally on the floor. It felt like a victory for about 30 seconds. Then the cat got spooked and ran off. I cheered him on, laughed a little, and then I tried to get up. I pushed. My quadriceps did not just burn, they trembled. They felt like wet tissue paper. I tried to roll to my knees, but my joints felt like they were filled with crushed glass. I was stuck. Right there, in the middle of my own living room, 3 feet from my favorite chair. I spent 22 seconds in absolute cold sweat panic. 22 seconds where I realized that if I could not find the strength to hoist myself up using the radiator, I would have to wait for the neighbor to check the mail and hope they heard me shouting. My own home had become an obstacle course I was failing to navigate. I eventually made it up, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But something in me stayed on that floor. I sat back in my chair and looked at that pill organizer. 11 pills every morning. A chemical harness keeping me upright. And I realized I was not aging. I was consenting to my own decay. 2 days later, I found myself at the supermarket. I was standing in the frozen aisle, my hand already on the door for the usual diet lasagna, the stuff in the box that tastes like cardboard and salt. I looked at it, then I looked at my reflection in the glass door. I put it back. I walked over to the produce section. It was quiet there. The fine mist they use to keep the vegetables fresh sprayed across my face, and it felt honest. I picked up a bunch of kale. It was rough and sturdy. I picked up a lemon. It smelled like something sharp and alive. I spent $40 that day, not on boxes, not on solutions, just on things that grew in the dirt. I did not have a plan. I did not have a miracle. I just had this tiny, fragile thought that would not leave me alone. What if I stopped treating my body like a failing machine and started treating it like a garden? I drove home and sat in my driveway for a long time, looking at those groceries in the passenger seat. My knees still ached. My heart rate was still too high. But for the first time in 10 years, I was not just waiting for the next pill. I was waiting for the morning. I had decided to try, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. I woke up the next morning and the floorboards still groaned. My knees still felt like they were filled with crushed gravel, and that lead vest of extra weight had not gotten a gram lighter overnight. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my feet. They looked old. They looked tired. And I realized that the bunch of kale and the lemon sitting in my fridge were not going to do the work for me. I found an old pair of sneakers at the back of the closet, the kind with the frayed laces that usually only saw the light of day when I was heading to the pharmacy. They felt like lead weights when I pulled them on. I stepped out onto the driveway. It was 7:15 in the morning. The air was damp, smelling of wet asphalt and neighbors' cut grass. I set a goal. Just to the end of the driveway and back, 4 times. That is it. That was my marathon. I made it to the mailbox and my shins started to burn. By the 3rd trip, my breath was coming in these ragged, heavy gulps that embarrassed me, even though nobody was watching. I felt pathetic. That is the honest word for it. I was 70 years old, and I was struggling to navigate 30 feet of concrete. I came back inside, sat at the kitchen table with a shaking hand, and wrote 10 minutes in a little blue notebook I had bought. It looked like a joke. But I did it again Tuesday and Wednesday. The 2nd week was worse. That is the part they do not tell you. The newness wears off, and you are just left with the soreness. My hips ached in a way that made me want to crawl back to those amber bottles and just double the dose. But I kept thinking about that photo. I kept thinking about the gray shape in the back row. I moved the work into the kitchen too. No more boxes. No more peeling back plastic film and waiting for a beep. I started roasting things. Carrots, broccoli, onions, just a bit of olive oil and some rosemary I found growing wild near the fence. I would hear the hiss of the oven and the smell. It was like the earth was finally being invited back into my house. I went 30 days without a single gram of processed sugar. Do you have any idea how long 30 days feels when your brain is screaming for a cookie at 9 o'clock every night? I would just stand there in the dark kitchen, drink a glass of plain cold water, and wait for the craving to pass. It was boring. It was frustrating. And for the first 2 months, The scale did not move a single inch. Not one. Most people quit there. I almost did. I remember sitting on the sofa in month 3, looking at my sneakers and thinking, Lisa, you are 70. Just order the pizza. Stop pretending you are an athlete. I felt like I was pouring effort into a black hole. But then I noticed something. It was not the weight. It was the clock. I realized it was 2:30 in the afternoon, and I was not asleep. For years, I had to sleep after lunch just to have the energy to make it to dinner. But there I was, wide awake, looking at a stack of books I had not touched in a year. My body was still heavy, sure, but the engine was starting to hum again. By month 4, the 10-minute walk had become 20. I was not just going to the mailbox anymore. I was making it to the big oak tree at the corner of the block. I would go at 6:45 every morning before the world got too loud. Just me, the rhythm of my own breathing, and the thud-thud of those sneakers. Then came last Tuesday. I was heading up the stairs to put some laundry away. Now you have to understand, for 10 years those stairs were a mountain. I would have both hands white-knuckled on the railing, pulling myself up step by agonizing step. But I got to the 3rd or 4th stair, and I felt this lightness, this odd sensation in my legs. I stopped. I looked down. My right hand was just hovering there. It was not gripping the wood. It was not even touching the railing. I was standing on the stairs, supporting my own weight without any help at all. I stood there for a long minute, just staring at my own hand hanging there in the air. My heart was thumping, but not from exhaustion. It was something else. It was not a triumph, not yet. But I looked up at the top of the landing, and for the first time in a long, long time, the hallway did not look like it was miles away. It just looked like a door, and it was slightly, quietly open. I stood in front of that hallway mirror again last Tuesday. That same mirror that for years only showed me what I called the gray shape, a woman hidden under baggy sweaters, and a look of someone who had already given up on searching for herself. But the woman looking back now, she was wearing a pair of pants I had not been able to close since my grandson was in diapers. I grabbed my old leather belt, the one with the deep grooves where I used to tighten it, always trying to hide what the scale insisted on telling me. I pulled the leather and the buckle simply slid. It went right past the last hole. There was nowhere left to fasten it. I had to go to the kitchen and grab a metal skewer. I sat at the table, the same table where I used to organize those 11 pills every morning, and I pierced the leather. A new hole, 2 inches back, maybe more. It is a dry sound, that pop of metal through leather. It did not sound like a victory march. It just sounded like the truth. I lost 25 kilograms, one boring, consistent day at a time. It was not because of a miracle or anything special about me. It was just because I stopped waiting for something external to save me and started walking. A few weeks ago, I went to my routine 82-year-old checkup. I sat on that exam table, the one with the sterile paper that makes a zip sound every time you move. My doctor, Dr. Aris, has been seeing me for 15 years. He looked at my blood panel. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back at the computer screen. He sat there in silence for a full minute. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. He took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and finally picked up his pen. He did not say a word. He just started drawing lines. One by one, crossing out the blood pressure medication, crossing out the sugar control medicine, crossing out the statins. He looked up and said, "Lisa, I have been writing these prescriptions for 12 years. How is it possible that I am crossing every single one of them out today?" I did not tell him about the kale or the rosemary. I did not tell him about the thousands of miles I walked in the dark before the sun came up. I just looked at him and said, "I decided to stop being a patient, doctor. I decided to be a person again. My resting heart rate is 62 beats per minute now. My blood pressure is 118/75. I know they are just numbers on a page, but to me, they are the sound of my own freedom. I recovered something I did not even know I had lost, my own presence. This morning I walked 5 miles, not because I had to, not because I was trying to prove something to the neighbors. I walked because my legs felt strong and the air was fresh, and for the first time in 20 years, I was not carrying that lead vest made of shame and resignation. I was just moving. I look at my hands now. They are steady. My mind is clear. I no longer wake up wondering if the floorboards will groan under my weight. I wake up wondering where I am going to manage to get to today. The invisibility I felt at 70, that feeling of being just an old piece of furniture in the living room of my own life, has disappeared. I am no longer a medical case to be managed. I am an 82-year-old woman who discovered that the body still obeys when we decide, calmly, that we still want to live. And I look at you now, and I know what you might be thinking. You are looking at your own orange bottles on the counter. You are feeling the stiffness in your own hips as you stand up from the chair. You are waiting for the slow fade that they told you was inevitable. You think your story has already been written, and that now only the footnotes are left. But I am sitting here at this table, 25 kilograms lighter, with a heart that beats firm and true. And I want to tell you something, not as advice, not as an instruction, just as one human being talking to another who might be standing where I once was. I see you. I was you. That is all I know.